Want to strengthen your arguments? Learn about the 12 most important fallacies that people make in debates and conversations. Stick around to learn about how to effectively spot them and how to effectively respond to them. Hi guys, if you're new here, my name is Bogdan and I'm a professor at John Cabot University of Rome. I also used to teach at Oxford and Princeton. Over the years, I noticed that many of my students were not capable of identifying these most common logical fallacies. But don't worry, if you are in a heated debate or a conversation with someone, I'll help you identify these important logical fallacies, but also how to combat them and how to respond to them. So let's get into it. The first type of logical fallacy is ad hominem attack. These are fairly widespread in regular conversations, but even in academic debates. So typically ad hominem attacks attack the person rather than engaging with an argument or the logic of the argument. Often used in order to undermine the credibility of the speaker or the interlocutor. So this could include insults, this could include questioning of the character, of the motives of the person that they're speaking to. So typical examples would be, you cannot trust her views on the environment. She's not a scientist. Or his opinion on taxes is irrelevant because he's wealthy. This is an ad hominem attack. False dilemma is another important type of fallacy. According to this, you only presented with two options when many more exist, or a more nuanced version of those options exists. So fundamentally, the purpose is to simplify issues, forcing an either or choice. So a good example of this would be, you're either with us or against us. Or if we don't ban social media, people will no longer be productive. Strawman fallacy is another common type of error. Strawman fallacy essentially entails misrepresenting the opponent's position, oversimplifying it or reducing it to something that was not originally intended by the interlocutor. So the purpose here is to distort or to exaggerate the original argument made by the opponent. It could twist words, it could create an extreme version of what the discussant was debating. Examples of this would be, they want to shut down all the industries and ruin the economy. Or, we should regulate pollution to protect the environment. Appeal to authority uses the opinion of a perceived expert or authority as evidence without verifying the validity of the argument. So the purpose here is to persuade the listener that because an expert is saying that something is correct, this should be accepted without validating their opinion. So you could typically hear references to famous people, references to scientists who received awards, or even references to institutions supporting particular claims, even sometimes when they lack expertise in that particular field. So for example here, a celebrity endorses a diet, so that's why everybody should use it. Or a Nobel laureate recommended this policy, so that's why a country should adopt that particular policy. Ecological fallacy has nothing to do with ecology. In fact, it's a type of error that people commit when they try to draw inferences from group-level conclusions onto individuals. So the purpose here is to generalize incorrectly from the population onto individuals. So this essentially assumes that group characteristics apply to individuals. Examples of this would be, this country has high literacy rates, so that's why every individual in the country is well educated. Or this area is inhabited by rich people, so this means that everybody you're going to be meeting on the street in that area is rich. Appeal to emotion manipulates emotions such as fear, anxiety, anger, in order to convince the opponent or an audience of particular positions. So the purpose here is to evoke emotional responses that overshadow rational evaluation of an argument. So you could use dramatic stories, you could encounter the use of particular language in order to elicit these emotional responses. So examples of this would be, if we do not donate to this campaign, we will end up with children starving. Or if this policy does not get passed, imagine the heartbreak. Sunk cost fallacy occurs when decisions made depend on previously invested resources, time, money, effort, rather than the future benefits of those decisions. So the purpose here is to justify committing to typically a failing endeavor because of past investments. So examples of this would be, I cannot stop now, I've invested so much time and money into this project. Or, I put years in this project, I must keep going. Cherry picking selects specific types of evidence that supports the opinion or the point made by the debater. And this will ignore the data or other studies or pieces of evidence that may potentially discredit or lead to a different conclusion. So the purpose of cherry picking is to present a biased or one-sided argument. This could take the form of highlighting favorable statistics, citing studies that only reach one type of conclusion, while omitting other studies or omitting other types of evidence. So for example here, this study shows that there's no climate change effect, ignoring other 10 studies that reach a different conclusion. So our product doubled its sales in one region, while failing to look at the sales in the rest of the country. Correlation taken for causation fallacy. This is fairly widespread. This assumes that because two events are temporally related to each other, this means that they're also potentially causally related to each other. So the purpose here is to link events that have nothing to do with each other for a causal relationship in order to have a specific effect on the audience. So examples of this would be ice cream sales and drowning went up over the summer. So it must be that ice cream consumption is connected to drowning. Or people who exercise are happier. So it must be true that in order to be happy, you must exercise. And now we're going to try to identify some of these fallacies in the recent presidential debate, the debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. Which ones do you think were the most common fallacies here? Well, continue to watch and let's see together. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to watch the presidential debate and I'm going to try to identify some of the fallacies that I mentioned earlier. I've already edited the video in a way that focuses more on those fallacies, but at the same time still allows us to understand the bigger context and the bigger question that was addressed to both candidates. So without further ado, let's play start.
I want to begin tonight with the issue that voters repeatedly say is their number one issue, and that is the economy and the cost of living in this country. Vice President Harris, you and President Trump were elected 4 years ago, and your opponent on the stage here tonight often asks his supporters, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? When it comes to the economy, do you believe Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago?
My plan is to give a $50,000 tax deduction to startup small businesses, knowing they are part of the backbone of America's economy. My opponent, on the other hand, his plan is to do what he has done before, which is to provide a tax cut for billionaires and big corporations, which will result in $5 trillion to America's deficit.
Okay, so what you see here, it's exactly a strawman fallacy. Kamala Harris is trying to simplify Trump's policies. I'm sure that Trump's policies are much more complex and much more numerous than providing tax cuts to billionaires. So this is a very good example of a strawman fallacy, misrepresenting the opponent's policies on purpose.
We've had a terrible economy because inflation which is really known as a country buster. It breaks up countries. We have inflation like very few people have ever seen before, probably the worst in our nation's history.
Here too, you have an example of hasty generalization, an example in which Trump is trying to make things much worse, portray things as much worse than they actually are. I mean, what about inflation during World War II? Or the 1970s oil crisis? So these are all events in American history where you see inflation spikes. So this is an example of hasty generalization.
We were at 21%, but that's being generous because many things are 50, 60, 70, and 80% higher than they were just a few years ago. This has been a disaster for people, for the middle class, but for every class. On top of that, we have millions of people pouring into our country from prisons and jails, from mental institutions and insane asylums, and they're coming in and they're taking jobs that are occupied right now by African Americans and Hispanics.
Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond.
So Donald Trump has no plan for you. And when you look at his economic plan, it's all about tax breaks for the richest people. I am offering what I describe as an opportunity economy. And the best economists in our country, if not the world, have reviewed our relative plans for the future of America. What Goldman Sachs has said is that Donald Trump's plan would make the economy worse. Mine would strengthen the economy. What the Wharton School has said is Donald Trump's plan would actually explode the deficit.
So here, what you see is exactly the use of argument by authority. So the idea of using what the economists, what the specialists, what the experts have been saying in order to discredit the opponent's set of policy or the opponent's set of arguments. So ideally, what Kamala Harris should do is to really engage with the policies. What did the Wharton School say? What did these economists say as being problematic about Trump's policies? Like, what is the cause and consequence? What is the independent variable? And what is the dependent variable? Rather than just resorting to what the experts have been saying.
18 Nobel laureates have described his economic plan as something that would increase inflation and by the middle of next year would invite a recession.
She doesn't have a plan. She copied Biden's plan, and it's like 4 sentences, like run, spot, run.
So here you see again another use of the ad hominem attack. Rather than engaging with Kamala Harris's policies, he's just saying that she's been copying Biden's plan. So in a way, accusations of plagiarism, but also saying that she doesn't have a plan. So it's a somewhat, I would say, an ad hominem attack here.
4 sentences that are just, oh, we'll try and lower taxes. She doesn't have a plan. Take a look at her plan. She doesn't have a plan.
Your plan is what she calls is essentially a national sales tax. Your proposal calls for tariffs, as you pointed out here, on foreign imports across the board. You recently said that you might double your plan, imposing tariffs up to 20% on goods coming into this country. As you know, many economists say that with tariffs at that level, costs are then passed on to the consumer. Vice President Harris has...
So here's, for example, the way the question is being asked. So here's an effective way in which to use the opinion of experts in order to justify an answer. Well, the economist is saying that these tariffs will have a knock-on effect on consumers. So this is more engaging with an argument or with a set of policies rather than arguing that, oh, the experts are saying that my policies are good.
Argue that it'll mean higher prices on gas, food, clothing, medication, arguing it costs the typical family nearly $4,000 a year. Do you believe Americans can afford higher prices because of tariffs?
They're not going to have higher prices. What's going to have, and who's going to have higher prices is China and all of the countries that have been ripping us off for years.
Vice President Harris, I do want to ask for your response.
When a policy about China should be in making sure the United States of America wins the competition for the 21st century, which means focusing on the details of what that requires, focusing on relationships with our allies, focusing on investing in American-based technology so that we win the race on AI, on quantum computing, focusing on what we need to do to support America's workforce so that we don't end up having on the short end of the stick in terms of workers' rights.
President Trump, I'll let you respond.
First of all, they bought their chips from Taiwan. We hardly make chips anymore, and it will be the end of our country. She's a Marxist.
Okay, so saying that it will be the end of our country, this is a good example of a slippery slope argument. So he's again obviously trying to attack the Democrats and attack their policies. So he's saying, oh, these policies are so terrible that this will be the end of our country. This is a very good example of slippery slope fallacy. And then in addition, he just started mentioning she's a Marxist. Again, an ad hominem attack. he's obviously trying to suggest that that's a bad thing. So this is a good example of another ad hominem attack. Maybe it's not quite as insulting because that's sort of expressing or stating belonging to a particular school of thought. But let's hear what he's got to say.
Everybody knows she's a Marxist. Her father's a Marxist professor in economics, and he taught her well. But when you look at what she's done to our country, and when you look at these millions and millions of people that are pouring into our country monthly.
So what you see here is exaggerated language and appeal to emotion, millions and millions of people pouring into our country. Without enough evidence, this could be interpreted as appeal to emotion in order to express or emphasize how bad the opponent's policies are.
Where it's, I believe, 21 million people, not the 15 that people say. And I think it's a lot higher than the 21. That's bigger than New York State pouring in. And just look at what they're doing to our country. They're criminals. Many of these people coming in are criminals.
Okay, here too, use of emotional language and sort of exaggeration in order to attract attention to how bad Kamala's policies are, but in addition to raise awareness or raise the attention of the public to emphasize this immigration as being particularly problematic for the country.
And that's bad for our economy.
I want to turn to the issue of abortion. President Trump, you often touted that you were able to kill Roe v. Wade. Last year, you said that you were proud to be the most pro-life president in American history. Then last month, you said that your administration would be great for women and their reproductive rights. In your home state of Florida, you surprised many with regard to your 6-week abortion ban because you initially had said that it was too short. And you said, quote, I'm going to be voting that we need more than 6 weeks. But then the very next day, you reversed course and said you would vote to support the 6-week ban. Vice President Harris says that women shouldn't trust you on the issue of abortion because you've changed your position so many times. Therefore, why should they trust you?
Well, the reason I'm doing that vote is because the plan is, as you know, the vote is, they have abortion in the 9th month. They even have, and you can look at the governor of West Virginia, the previous governor of West Virginia, not the current governor, who's doing an excellent job, but the governor before, he said, the baby will be born and we will decide what to do with the baby. In other words, we'll execute the baby.
Here too, you see a sort of use of emotional language in order to exacerbate or to make the situation seem worse, executing the baby. Okay, so these were approximately 10 minutes of the last presidential debate. I selected the parts that allow me to emphasize these logical fallacies. I hope you found the video useful, and I hope this will be a series of videos that would allow you to become better critical thinkers and be able to question more effectively the messages that you're getting from politicians, but also the kinds of messages that you're reading on social media. If you've enjoyed this video, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. See you soon.